Shout out to the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund. This G-Mac. The Housing Act of 1934 created subsidized mortgages and awarded them to people non-black. The racist developers built a wall on 8 Mile and Burwood to keep the all-white development zone intact. The same act created rental assistance mainly for blacks. The homeowners loan corp created redlining maps to determine where they could and couldn't lend at. Underclass planning can't defend that. Deliberately helped my kin back out 120 billion. My people saw 2% toward ownership. This government assisting on paying rent. The 30s to the 60s, the sort of mortgage monopoly undeveloped the blacks, leaving whites wealthy with property. Things have a reason in the season, it's a new day. Black Farmer Land Fund restoring justice a new way. Exploring access, restoring blackness to farming like compost. Breaking down the barriers and bringing what was far close. Black woman led and ran, raised over 50 grand in less than a month span. Got a plan, need some land to work your black hand. Self-sufficiency, abundance, we bringing it back, fam. Like
we will post more information, in particular our application for black farmers here in Detroit who are looking to own their land that they're growing up. We're excited to hear from you and to support you in this endeavor. So, good morning, MIFS Conference. Welcome to Designing Restorative Models and Systems with the Michigan Black Farmers Land Funds. My name is Erin Preston-Johnson Bevel. I am a co-founder of the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund, and we are going to be talking with myself from the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund, the Washanah County Black Farmers Fund, and the West Michigan Bipoc Farmers Fund. So you may not have known that Michigan has 3 funds right now in different parts of the state that are all trying to raise funds and raise awareness of some of the issues that Black and Bipoc farmers are facing. So we're really excited to come together in the work that we're all doing in different parts of the state, but also to come together with you. So welcome. And I think you can see my slides. And I want to introduce Keisa. I know added this acknowledgements slide. I don't know if who do we need to acknowledge beyond, of course, MIFS for putting together this conference, making it virtual, making it possible, helping us coordinate and get everything together so that we could be joining you again from different parts of the state. I am on the east side of Detroit. We have folks from the western side of the state and Washanah County. Also acknowledging, of course, all of the other co-founders of our respective funds, right? So there are 3 other co-founders of the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund. I know that Payge and Alita will talk about the West Michigan BIPOC Farmer Fund. There's a group there. And of course, Keisa at Washanah County is working with a variety of other folks as well. Is there anyone that I missed, ladies, that we should acknowledge? Let me see, I'm looking at the screen to see what you think. Okay, we're good, good. Okay, so we're just gonna introduce ourselves briefly. I kind of did already to some extent, but my name again is Erin Preston-Johnson Bevel. This is a picture of me farming at Soulfire Farm this summer in upstate New York, which is a really awesome experience. I do a variety of things, but I am deeply committed, I guess first and foremost as a mother and as a Black woman to, returning to the land and to reclaiming agriculture as such an important practice, not just again for building food sovereignty, but also for I found it to be deeply healing, right, on an ancestral level, and just really helping me to feel close and connected to my ancestors who have done this work for generations, and the people now who were working so hard to make sure can get access to the land that they need to grow or that can purchase the land that they're already growing on. So I co-founded the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund with 3 other phenomenal Black women here in Detroit, Black agriculturalists. And in my spare time, I am a professor at Howard University, a virtual professor, and I'm also on the board of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. We will talk more specifically about all of our funds a little later, but the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network is one of 3 long-standing urban farming organizations in Detroit that came together to be the coalition that now is the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund. And next, I'll just keep the slides on if that makes sense. We want to move to Keisa Johnson, if you want to introduce yourself.
Yeah, everybody, how you guys doing? I was born and raised in Muskegon Heights, Michigan. I am a Michigander, and I love it. I work in a variety of different sectors when it comes to food systems. I'm a recent graduate of the Penny Stamp School of Art and Design, where I studied rigorously equity and access in food systems. As myself, like many of us on the call, we show up in a variety of different ways. Sometimes I'm a mother, sometimes I'm a good friend, I'm a daughter, but specifically within the food systems, I'm the first racial equity chair of the Washanah Food Policy Council. I'm also the coalition leader for the Washanah Food Policy, for the Washanah Black Farmers Fund. Because of a lot of the work of me working with different Black and brown farmers within the state of Michigan, as well as different Black-led food systems organizations, I thought it would be best to situate myself within food policy. So now I'm doing a food policy fellowship with the Center for Regional Food Systems, where I'm helping to co-lead the Michigan Local Food Network. So I'm bringing more heart and soul into policy making, and we need all of that. We need that type of care. And so that's who I am. And that's how I'm showing up, and I'll pass it to Alita and Payge.
Those intros just got me so excited. I'm learning new things about these amazing women every day, every time that I get together with them. But hi, everyone. Good afternoon. My name's Alita Kelly, and I'm representing the West Michigan Bipoc Farmerland Fund along with Payge. We have 3 other women that are part of our group as well. Born and raised in Grand Rapids here in West Michigan. My educational background is in environmental science and sustainable business from U of M, which I'm just realizing that all of us are U of M grads. Actually, everyone here on the panel. I founded Southeast Market, which is a small grocery store operating through a sustainable and equitable lens. Founded that in 2020. Along with our MLK Freedom School, which is a children's enrichment program connecting inner city BIPOC youth to opportunities in urban agriculture, mindfulness activities, and learning about intersectional justice, as well as increasing their vocabulary when it comes to whole foods. So identification and vocabulary around whole foods. I sit as the chair for the city of Grand Rapids Urban Agriculture Committee. And so through that work, we're shifting policy here in Grand Rapids, so it's easier to grow in the city. And then also doing our work with the BIPOC Farmer Land Fund. Really passionate about food sovereignty, specifically for communities of color. And in my spare time, I enjoy spending time with my family, observing insects. That's a huge passion of mine, which is easy to do when you're gardening and growing, and just learning all of the different lessons from being connected to the land and that Mother Earth has to share with us. And here's Payge.
Thanks, Alita, and thanks everyone for being here today. And thank you, MIFS, for bringing us together. It's been really great and a lot of fun to work with this group of women every week and plan this talk for y'all today. So my name's Payge, my pronouns are she, they. I'm a farmer and organizer from Southeast Michigan. I'm now based in Grand Rapids. For the past couple of years, I've been living here, and that's where I got to meet this amazing group of women that came together to form the West Michigan BIPOC Farmer Land Fund. I've been a farm worker for a few years, and recently last season was able to take on my first managerial role and got to work with some kids doing youth education programs, and really passionate about that work. Hopefully helping push the next generation of young farmers forward from a young age, we can hope. So I also studied at the University of Michigan. I did biology, sustainable food systems, and gender and health there. And that's kind of where I was introduced more to the farming world. It was first through public health and nutrition, but then through that, I realized that really we should be focusing more on food sovereignty and connection to land and fostering community to bring everyone to a healthier world. For the past couple of years, I've been working as the Michigan organizer for the National Young Farmers Coalition. If you're not familiar, that's a grassroots policy advocacy organization that engages farmers to tell their stories around advocacy work for the Farm Bill, and that's been going on since 2014. So for the past year, I've been hearing from farmers across the state, hearing their difficulties using programs that are supposed to be designed for farmers, and trying to connect them with resources to make those programs more accessible. I also, through that, became really passionate about the power of cooperation and community in farming, and was able to host an event about cooperative farming, hopefully to foster more of that cooperative spirit here in Michigan. I think that these funds do a great job of fostering that cooperative spirit and, telling the community like, hey, you can harness your power, you can engage in this work, and we can all uplift each other. So I'm really excited to be here today. Thanks all for being here. And I think next we're passing it off to Keisa to hear about some historical context.
All right, let's see. Actually, okay, I'll start here. So actually, and I didn't realize either, Alita, that we were all U of M grads, so that's pretty dope. And my U of M degree is in history, right? So again, I'm a professor at Howard. I'm also a lawyer, but I really just teach now. But so I think whenever we come together to discuss our work and discuss why we do what we do and why our funds are essential, it's important to have some historical context. It can help bring into perspective some of the problems that we're trying to solve, because these problems are not new. And in fact, as a matter of fact, they're intergenerational, right? And so, I always think that if we can start here, we can have a shared understanding of where we're coming from and know where we're going. And so I start with this slide that I actually got from Dr. Shakira Tyler, who is one of the other co-founders of the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund, just to show the kind of this vast disparity that has always existed, at least, again, this starts in 1910, but for, obviously, pre-1910, the same, there was limited, if any, Black farmland ownership. And I'll talk a little bit later about when Black farmland ownership actually legally started, right? Like when Black people could actually begin to own their own farms. But for most of the past century, the disparity between the Black and white acres owned, and when you're talking about farmers, is vast, with a peak. I don't know if you can see my cursor, but a peak here in about 1910, before, kind of flatlining to where we are now, right? So 15% of farmers around 1910 were Black, and now it's down to 1%. So, I think it's important to understand, the problem that we're facing. And when we come into these spaces and we come into community with one another as farmers, as agriculturalists, and as land stewards, and we say we're committed to equity in our food system, right? We're committed to racial equity in our food system, and we see something like this, this is a huge problem, right? It's unconscionable for any of us, right? And so it kind of lays a foundation of where we need to go. Just think about it. For example, every January, right, we recommit ourselves to Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream, right? That one day this nation will rise and live out the true meaning of its creed. And so this is a part of that. Looking at these things and saying, okay, we understand what we're seeing, but what are we going to do to change it, right? Like, what are we going to do this century to move the needle forward? And so I think it's always good to kind of begin with an understanding of where we are and where we have been for quite some time. So when you think about it too, thinking about land ownership, right? And I saw some of the panel yesterday about land back also. So certainly not to exclude any discussions of land ownership and why it's dicey, right? When we're talking about, even for Black people, right? For Black farmers, when we are, gaining and wanting to come back to the land and own it, the problems that stem from that too. But, I saw this article that really, struck me in Bloomberg last year, just even thinking even about, if you don't even read the quote, 150 years of farmland ownership, right? And that's something that most, if not any, Black farmers can say that they have, right? This requires an intergenerational passage of land through a family or through, a farm system. And that's something that just isn't possible, or hasn't been possible. And so that's one of the things that we strive to change. But this woman, she did some genealogy work, and she says, my family owned slaves. I think it's important to say that. My relatives don't talk about it very often, not because it's some deep hidden secret or anything. It's just some things are easier left unsaid. But it happened, and until a few years ago, my grandmother's cousin lived there in the same grand gable-roofed white mansion and surrounding 900 acres that James Z. George and his family, my family, had owned for more than 150 years, right? And so when I think about the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund and the work that I do, I think about, I want to be able to pass farmland to my daughter, and I want her to be able to pass it to her daughter. I want that to be unencumbered, by any kind of, racial bias or problems or, issues with the USDA or anything, that Black farmers have had to deal with over the course of the last century. And, I think that for many Black farmers, this is the goal. This is something that we wish to achieve for ourselves. And there are many ways that we can do that. And but it's, again, good to start and understand what the context is. And I see there's a question. Okay, we can take that a little bit later. And, again, so historical context, the most foundational aspect of freedom in America, right, is land ownership, right? So even from the very beginning, and if you think about some of the basic ways that you engage with American society, right? Like, are you on the voter rolls? Are you getting called for jury duty, right? So those things all, have been based and steeped in your ability to own land, right? If you don't own land or you don't have land ownership, then you're not even a part of those processes. And Black farmers and their land are and have always been the subject of unconstitutional, state-sponsored racial discrimination and illegal land theft. Oops, this thing keeps moving when I'm not ready. Okay. Amidst pervasive racial violence. For example, so at the time of American independence on July 4th, 1776, and again, I point these things out because I do it for my students, right, when I teach, but I think sometimes people don't think about this. Slavery had already been happening for 157 years, right? So this is an ingrained part of American society by this point, by the time that independence was declared. And so think about that like a savings account, right? It's like 157 years of unpaid labor, right? Labor that had gone into building the infrastructure and gone into building the nation that would be able to say, we want to be independent from Britain. And so not only that 157 years of unpaid labor was a huge part of being able to fund the Revolutionary War, right? The Revolutionary War was what eventually got us to being the United States of America. But also just being that it had been happening for 157 years, it is a part of the fabric that was created in America. And it's something that we all know, right? But I don't think we all think about the impact that it continues to have on things like land ownership for Black people. And it didn't just, end and go away. So as I mentioned, I alluded to this earlier, but Black land ownership and in the eyes of the law, right, what would be the Black farmer became possible after the Civil War, right? The Civil Rights Act of 1866, which gave freed Blacks the right to enter into contracts, to sue, and to inherit, purchase, lease, sell, hold, and convey real and personal property, right? So that's a big deal. That was something that was not in place. Of course, I think there were Black farmers before then. I believe my great-great-great-grandparents purchased their farm in September of 1865, right after the Civil War was over. They were in the North, though. They were in Ohio, but still, we're talking, mainly about the South and the Black farmers that were in the South, now free, moving forward with their lives and wanting to utilize the skills that they had. And these are ancestral skills, right? Because, African people were being agriculturalists long before slavery happened, right, on the African continent. So having these skills, wanting to utilize them for ourselves, our families, and our communities, just like we do now. The Civil Rights Act of 1866, and then the 14th Amendment was passed the same year, right? 14th Amendment was supposed to protect freed Black persons and secure their rights of American citizenship. But neither of those acts were consistently enforced in the Confederate South, unfortunately. And even with the 14th Amendment, it was supposed to specifically be about Black citizenship, but ultimately, in order to get it ratified by all the states, it was more of a general guarantee of life, liberty, and property of all persons, right? As opposed to, this integration of Black people, of the enslaved, right, into citizens of the United States of America. And this, unfortunately, and of course, we all know a lot of this, but this left Black freed men and women with limited freedom of movement, minimal ability to actually contract or purchase land, even though they now had the right to do so. And this is all of this is still going on while there's lynch mobs and racial violence and intimidation, which we know and is well documented. And this is the same kind of violence and intimidation that would eventually force millions of Black people out of the South for good. And our another co-founder of the Black Farmer Land Fund, Jerry Hebron of Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, she tells me the story of her grandfather who had a farm in Tennessee. And he was farming, and this was again, this was this century, right after the turn of the century. And she was a child, and she just remembers that they said, we have to go, like we got to leave, and we're leaving tomorrow. And there was a white mob that was trying to harm her and her family and take their farm, and that's exactly what happened. And they left. They came up here to Detroit, and the farm was left, right? And so how many Black families had to experience that, and there's never been any recourse or recompense for that. You had to flee to save your life, but you who knows how much you put into the land that you purchased, that you had to leave behind, and that's heartbreaking. And I tell that story just because I think people often think that a lot of these things happened so long ago, but they really didn't. Right, like Jerry is alive and well and kicking, as some of you may know, and so it didn't happen that long ago for a lot of us, and so this is still very real. Again, I mentioned I'm a lawyer, so I'm going to go a little deeper into the legal stuff, and then we'll move on to some of the other things that we want to talk about. But I think a lot of us, of course, have heard about some of the issues with Black farmers now in the media and the debt relief provision that was in the COVID Act that's now kind of been held up, and why is that important, and what does that have to do with all the things that I'm talking about, right? And for hundreds of years, whether through legalization of slavery, non-existent enforcement of some of the laws that I just talked about, or even the delay and denial of USDA loans to Black farmers, which again is also well documented, the American government has systemically, directly, intentionally, and purposefully condone racial discrimination against Blacks, whether enslaved or free, right? And this, of course, includes Black farmers, and has had a deep detrimental impact on the chart that we saw earlier, right? I mean, that's one of the reasons it looks the way that it does. And then even once the courts began to hear racial discrimination cases, right, following Brown. So Brown kind of broke everything open, and now there was a chance for Black people to go to court and say, hey, I'm being racially discriminated against, and the courts to acknowledge that in some way. But racial discrimination claims now, they require a direct proof of intent to discriminate. Okay, so that's really hard to prove. It's really hard to prove unless someone comes out and says, I'm a virulent racist. It can be very difficult to prove that something that someone does is because of racial bias. And very often, I think people don't even recognize their own racial bias, as we know, right? So racial bias training is this big thing now. And a good example is Washington versus Davis, right? This was a 1976 case. There was a civil service written exam for people who wanted to be police officers. And a lot of Black applicants kept failing. Like, I think it was like 75% to 25%. And so, you know, the government was like, well, you know, we didn't mean to, right? Like, we didn't know that the test was going to be racially biased in whatever way. But the court said that it was still constitutional because it wasn't on purpose, basically, right? So if you have discriminatory impact, right, you have a test that is having a discriminatory impact against one group of people, if you can't prove that it was on purpose, then it's not unconstitutional, right? And so I say that because I think, again, people think that because racial discrimination claims exist and because people can go to court for racial discrimination now, that that's going to fix everything. But the reality is that it doesn't, right? It's like, again, unless you have some really strong evidence of the way someone thinks, which is, you know, as most lawyers and anybody else would tell you, which is very difficult to get, you're not going to be able to get proof of someone's discriminatory purpose. And so that makes it very, so this is something that is that's out of reach for a lot of, not just Black people, but Black farmers, right, who may be alleging claims of racial discrimination in their interactions with the USDA, trying to get loans, trying to get support with their loans. These are things that are not going to be solved in court, unfortunately. And, you know, furthermore, there's some racial discrimination that's created, like the debt relief provision that I mentioned. And it's meant to remedy some of this racial discrimination from the past, right? So all the things that we talked about, of course, you know, we have slavery, we have Jim Crow, you know, we have separate but equal, right? So there's all these things that happen that we now acknowledge are wrong, right? So it's like, okay, can we use the law to kind of to equalize the playing field, to fix this, to bring us to an equitable place? But the reality is that in things like the debt provision, right, that's what it was supposed to do. It was supposed to remedy some past discrimination against socially disadvantaged farmers, which is really BIPOC farmers, but of course includes Black farmers as well. And that, because it's intentional, right, because the intention is to remedy past discrimination. But again, going back to what I said before, if it's intentional discrimination, it's unconstitutional. If it's accidental discrimination, then it's okay, right? And so what's happened now is that the debt relief provision has gotten caught up because it's intentional for the right reason, I guess I would say, but it's intentional nonetheless. And so the courts won't let it go forward. They say it's unconstitutional. You can't discriminate against race. It's this. I'm not going to go into this, but there's this whole thing about the colorblind Constitution and how the Constitution should be colorblind. And while, I mean, that's a great ideal, the Constitution hasn't been colorblind for the past 400 years. And so, you know, I think we have to acknowledge that, and we have to be real about that. And we have to, you know, it's important that people understand that from the legal context, the law is not going to take care of this, right? And so that's why some of our funds exist. That's why we're doing the work that we do, because the law is not going to do it, and or at least it's not doing it now. And so it kind of like sets the stage for where we are and where we're going. And again, I don't want to get too professory on you guys, but and this is just some stuff that I wanted to share about the debt relief provision. Again, $5 billion for debt relief. This was going to be one of the biggest pieces of debt relief that, you know, Black farmers had seen. As Tracy McCurdy, a Black lawyer that's been working with Black farmers for years, says, it's a milestone in Black agrarian history. We've never received federal legislation to undergird or support Black economic wealth creation and land ownership, right? So this was a really big deal. But, you know, and as we can see above from the New York Times, there were a lot of payments for the $23 billion that were given out under the COVID bill to farmers, but they were based on crop size and other things. Crop size, much of the money ended up going to larger and wealthier farmers who are disproportionately white, right? And so again, this is something that we know, but how are we solving it? What are we doing we know that it's a problem and we don't like it, but we have to go a step further. Like, okay, but what are we going to do, and how are we going to change it? Here we go. The state stimulus bill was intended to rebalance that, is what Secretary Vilsack said when this first started, when the federal courts kind of first started shutting everything down, or shutting down the debt relief provisions. Yeah, there are violations of the 5th and 14th Amendments. And it can be easier, right, to prove this kind of reverse discrimination that we see, right? So as I mentioned, something like this debt relief would have to be, narrowly tailored to serve a compelling government interest. These are legal terms. They don't really have too much meaning here, but, the way that these standards are applied by the Supreme Court and the federal courts, it makes it much easier to prove reverse discrimination than it is to prove to try to remedy direct discrimination, like what the debt relief provision is trying to do. And so even though the judge acknowledges, in this case, this is I think this was the case from Wisconsin, when the federal court shut down the debt relief provision there. USDA has a dark history of past discrimination. Again, this is well documented and well known. This isn't a surprise. But it's like the courts are still not allowing us to remedy that past discrimination, at least not the way that we want to. To allow the perpetuation of discrimination in such a manner would undermine the Supreme Court's ultimate goal of eliminating entirely from governmental decision-making such irrelevant factors as a human being's race. And again, that's a great ideal, but it doesn't account for the fact that that hasn't been the case for all this time, right? So we can't just decide that now the Constitution is colorblind when it hasn't been colorblind for all this other time. So again, these are just to give some context, and I like to end with this, just because I think this is the foundation, right? Like we have to, if we say that we're committed to racial equity in the food system, we say that we want to bring these changes to the food system, we have to be able to acknowledge that maybe a bunch of white slave owners from the 1700s did not come up with the best government ever. It doesn't mean that everything about it is bad and wrong, but it means that there's a lot about it that needs to change. And we have to acknowledge that. I think America can be great and wrong at the same time. And I think so often we think it's like it's one or the other, but it's not. I mean, like, America is this very, very complex, nation that has existed. And, America certainly does not have, no blood on its hands. And again, we all know that. But, if we can all start from the premise of saying, let's reimagine what this really is and what the historical context is that we're coming from. And that can help us move forward, right? That can help us in doing the work that we're doing and setting the stage for the work that still needs to be done. We and our Black Farmer Funds are doing a lot of great things, but we still need more support, and we still need, systemic changes to the food system and to our government to get to a place where we're going to be able to acknowledge the truth and move forward in a way that's effective for everyone, right? Because again, my liberation is tied up in yours. So this is the first step. I just want to make sure I have some notes. I wanted to make sure that I caught everything, but yeah, this is important. So I just want you to remember this. I'd love to take questions, at the end or whatnot. But that's the legal and historical context. And I love these pictures of greens. So I'm not sure. I think that is Keisa.
That is me.
Yeah, it's gonna take us into food sovereignty. I know it's a little heavy, but it's again, I think it's essential to start there, and then let's move forward and talk about. So we talked about the problem. Let's talk about the solutions. So thank you.
Thanks, Erin. Yeah, I know for a lot of people, some people it's deep, because the things that we're talking about totally goes against to how you were raised, what you saw in education. So I'm gonna start off with this. And you're very hard to control when you're healthy. Erin, can you advance the next slide? You're very hard to manipulate when you're clear. Next slide. You're very hard to influence when you're sovereign. And I'm here to talk a little bit about the interconnections of food sovereignty and to share some definitions maybe you're not quite aware of, or maybe you are if you're African and indigenous people of the earth. Can you go to the next slide? We live in a global food system, not just locally, but a global food system that is extremely anti-Black. It's anti-Black because it's based upon white supremacy, and it's based upon land theft. And when you think about those things from a global perspective, from a national perspective, a regional perspective, and a local perspective, you have to understand these interweaving, these interconnections that constantly keep people oppressed. And so when we look at these structures, these oppressive structures, we often ignore and we treat them intersectional, because we have to, in order to consider how food is not separate from race, is not separate from gender, is not separate from the ability. And so where a person or a community stands at all these different intersections means that they have a radically different life chance and access to food. That's Dr. Ashante Reese from Black Food Geographies. Can we go next? So here we are. We're living through a pandemic, but we've been living through a pandemic for quite some time, for many hundreds of years. And the reason why is because we are inundated with these normative standards, these generalizations of norms. It talks about the inequities, and it looks at things from a deficit just because it's different. Different is not bad. Different is amazing, because difference fertilizes innovative ideas and solutions. It keeps us from being culturally assimilated from this very stereotypical view. So we're able to look at ourselves holistically as whole humans. And right now, we really need that different cultural frame of reference, because right now it's killing the earth. We cannot divorce ourselves, the people from the earth and the earth from its people. And so now it's time for a new view point to emerge. We can go, Erin. Now, why culture? Why the importance of culture? Because we look at things from a very different, vast perspective, all the different groups. There's different issues, even when we look at the nature of reality and our value orientation, how our relationship to the divine, how we even look at knowledge and how we generate it, and even the different forms of how we do human contact. These things are very important to keep in mind when you're working across cultural groups and understanding, and it's fine. There's nothing wrong with this. But yet white supremacy teaches us that there is something wrong. There is something that needs to be standardized. There is something that needs to be normal. And because of that, again, we're killing the earth. When we talk about climate change, we're talking about climate change and consciousness and knowledge building, the nature of reality, how we look at things from a very different value perspective. Can we go to the next slide? So when we look at these value systems and how the fear is deeply embedded within the systems that we all touch on an everyday basis, when you look at it from a Eurocentric perspective, is much different from an African-centered perspective, okay? So when we're looking at the dimensions of self and our feelings and the way that we like to survive and how we speak within language, and even when we look at time and when we look at the universe and how we die and how we look at ourselves from a self-worth, we have very different value systems, but yet there's nothing wrong with that. But yet white supremacy teaches us that these things are wrong. that we can't celebrate the beauty in there being various colors of different flowers, and we can't celebrate the beauty of the various ways of how human beings come into existence. And so I just wanted to give us a little bit of understanding and a background that our value systems are extremely important when we're doing this food systems work, and we are looking at it from a very different perspective. Next slide. So let's talk about food sovereignty. I'm using some very specific definitions because as a designer, it's my place, and this is how I choose to design. In spaces that I come in, I tend to use Black, African, and Indigenous methods and methodologies. I choose not to use those of the tools that don't work, the tools that are constantly causing all of us damage and harm. And so I use a very specific definition of food sovereignty, and I believe my sisters on this panel will use the same thing, where we're trying to ship away from this corporate agriculture system towards our own governance of our own food system. It's going to be ecologically sound and sustainable, with the right for us to define and ultimately control our own agriculture system. You have to understand, shifting from a different space where governance puts the needs of the people who work and consume at the point of that food chain is much different than how we're continuously dying today, where the corporations are now at the center of the circle of human concern instead of us as people and individuals, okay? Next slide. Another one is food justice. I hear a lot of us out here using food justice. I know you good white people, you out there using it, but food justice is not a noun. It's a process whereby communities most impacted and exploited by this corporate control, this extractive system, where we're here to shape and redefine and provide indigenous community-based solutions to access and control our food, where we're humanizing it, we're making it fair, we're making it healthy and accessible and racially equitable and environmentally sound for everyone. So food justice is not a noun, it's a framework and it's an action. So when I hear that word food justice, I'm like, okay, so where's the actions in it? All right, because this goes beyond food access. It goes beyond that. It's here to ensure that our communities have not only the right, but the ability to have our community control of the food and include the means of production and distribution of it, okay? And why is this? Let's go into a little bit deeper about food justice. Let's go into the next slide. See, food justice hits on reproductive justice. It looks at the prison-industrial complex, the restoration, the violence that happens to us, the education, the environment, and the climate, our housing issues, labor. So if you're talking about you're doing food justice, then you got to come full circle and participate in the circle, and you got to be hitting on all these elements in order to create a new system and redesign and get rid of the old system of today, of what we see of the 20th century, because now we're living in the 21st. All right. Next slide. So food apartheid, I keep hearing this word, food desert. I often have to tell people, please stop, because we're living in this era of food apartheid, and it's more encompassing than a food desert. Apartheid covers ways in which we have lack of access to healthy food. It's systematic. It shoots from everywhere, from every piece of government, from every piece of education, every piece of law, everything. Go to the next slide, please. And so a proper definition of food apartheid is the systematic destruction of Black self-determination to control food, including the land, resource theft, discrimination, hypersaturation of destructive foods, predatory marketing and consumption, blatant discriminatory of corporate controlled food system that results in our communities suffering some of the highest rates of heart disease and diabetes. And so instead of looking at them, look at who profits from that them. Let's look at who profits, because if you're practicing sovereignty, you're practicing food justice, you're looking at food insecurity, then you're attacking who is ever benefiting from all of these atrocities that happen. So get rid of the word food desert. We don't want to hear it anymore. Food apartheid is a much more accurate representation of the structural racialized inequities that's perpetuated through our current system. So name it, call it for what it is, and that's how we'll be able to provide better solutions. Next slide. So why? Why is this? Because there is joy in this. The joy is there's a long-term goal here for us to build an ecosystem of regenerative practices and institutions building. These are building blocks. We are the knowledge bearers of the world, Black people. We've been hit on our head a little bit. We come with this shattered consciousness and this fractured identity from being in a system that does not look at us as human beings. But a lot of us aren't hit on the head anymore, all right? So we're here to create and be the knowledge bearers that we are and create this new system, right? Next slide. So how are we going to do this? Well, it's all through design. What we're going to have to do is constantly go through character refinement, cognitive restructuring, constant cultural realignment, because we need this, we need to do this, we need to put our governance models in place, and we need to create better policies that keep us from being killed. And it's not just Black, like white, you guys are being killed by this. When you're dehumanizing the earth, you're dehumanizing the planet. When you're dehumanizing the people of the planet. And so now when we're talking about design, this is an ongoing process of restorative justice through ecological, cultural, psychological, economic, political values and other informal means. And so we'll talk about how some of our models are being constantly built. Remember, it's all through design. Next slide.
I wish I had my camera off because they told me I had my camera, but I wish you could just see all of my reactions to all of the things that you just said. Okay. So thank you so much, Keisa, for that frame. Because I love Keisa's design frame. I'm so excited to hear from Alita about cooperatives too. Just some really, really powerful things that we're bringing to you today. And so we hope that you are enjoying. We're going to take a short break in a little bit, but we wanted to introduce our funds right before we come back and talk kind of more specifically about, now that again we've framed the problem, we've framed even like the perspective of the solution, kind of like how do we need to look at the solutions that we're creating? How do we need to design the solutions that we need? The Detroit Black Farm and Land Fund, again, I am a co-founder, and we were founded on Juneteenth of 2020. I remember we were, COVID was ravaging Detroit in 2020. George Floyd had just been murdered, and there was just so much, happening that made a bad situation even worse, right? So the the food sovereignty movement has been strong in Detroit for since around 2006 and beyond, with the founding of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network. But land security, right, continues to be an issue in Detroit. We were very concerned. The Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, again, of which I'm on the board, Keep Growing Detroit, and Oakland Avenue Urban Farm. We all became very concerned, during COVID that, people that had been growing on land that perhaps they couldn't afford to purchase. We didn't want the city coming and taking people's land at such a dire, important time when it was essential that people were, remember, all the grocery stores didn't have any food, everything was was really in a bad place. And so people that were growing in their communities and making sure that elders and children had, fresh produce and had healthy food, right? So again, and Keisa mentioned this in terms of destructive food. There's so much destructive food that is available, through, the food apartheid system. You don't have a lot of choices in terms of fresh produce and the things that are going to keep you the most healthy, right? So during COVID, a big piece of it for us too, again, as Black people in Detroit was, we need to make sure that we can keep our people healthy so we can keep them alive. And so fresh produce, growing our own fresh produce, being connected to the land, all of those things have deep healing properties that are essential for our continued survival. And so the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund launched on Juneteenth, 2020. We thought we would raise $5,000 to get, a few farmers that we knew that were growing on land that they didn't own, that we could help them purchase that land. I think we had raised $5,000 by the end of the day. We ended up raising $65,000 that summer. Again, a coalition organization. So it's always been so exciting to work with Dr. Shakira Tyler, who is the board chair of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, Jerry Hebron, who's the executive director of Oakland Avenue Urban Farm, and Tapfira Rushton, who of Keep Growing Detroit, who really had the kind of the seed idea, right? Like she was the one who and you can check out our YouTube page. There are a variety of videos that we shared that year. Because again, we had no idea that it was going to get this big. And so we just kind of started putting out videos and talking to the world. And it turned into this grassroots network that has continued to support what we're doing, and that is raising funds and directly giving it back to Detroit urban farmers, Black farmers in the city to purchase vacant land from the city and grow on it, right? So there's so many things that go into that process, soil testing, making sure that the soil is good. And then once you get the land, which is a process in and of itself, once you get the land, kind of some of the wraparound services that farmers need, as we all know, the other things that you need to maintain the land, maintain your farm, keep things safe, and do the work, right? The most important work, which again is growing food for ourselves, for our families, and our communities. So we were so honored when we saw that Washanah County was starting a Black Farmer Fund, and then we heard about the West Michigan folks, and so it's an exciting time, right, to be a Black farmer in Michigan, a BIPOC farmer in Michigan, because we're getting the opportunity to really come back to the land and get some of the support that's necessary to stay there intergenerationally, right? Like, which is something that again has been very difficult for our ancestors, and now it's our turn to pick up that mantle and move forward. So next, I think the next slide is Washanah County Black Farmers Fund. Keisa, you want to introduce you guys?
Yeah. Okay, so the Washanah County Black Farmers Fund. So how we kind of got started was that Growing Hope, which is an urban farm in Ypsilanti, had I think they had a webinar, and it was about food injustices and building more equitable space. And they interviewed several farmers. And so a few other organizations got together and said that they wanted to do something different and change. At that time, I was the racial equity chair for the Washanah Food Policy Council. That was my first term. And they reached out to me and said that we need some leadership. And I put some thought into it a little bit, asked a couple of my jegnas, like, what would this mean? And what came back was like, why wouldn't they ask you? You do a lot of work, you're out in the community, you've been educated and trained within this system. And then also, I really like living in Washanah County. I like the surrounding area. And because I was brought up through Black excellence, I was taught that wherever you are, you give service to where you live and where you pay your taxes at. And so I thought that this would be a great space to kind of build out an ecosystem for Black farming, for Black farmers. So we were very intentional, even if you look at the design of our logo, the coloring, the imagery, how we show up within the community. We had a goal to raise $50,000, and $50,000, and we surpassed that goal. We raised actually maybe like over $140,000 to give back, and then we also took some money to also build in capacity for our next coming year, so we could be supportive of the cohort that's coming up. Currently, this is our first year. Can you go to the next slide? Our coalition is quite colorful and it's specific in that way. Washanah County is pretty different from Detroit. It's pretty different from West Michigan. It's pretty different from Flint. What is not different is the systematic issues that we all have to deal with on a daily basis. And so the work here, how we're structuring it is through ecosystem building. So you can see us right here. These are all currently the coalition members. We have some new members as well. Can you go to the next slide? So if you see, we have some very distinct organizations. We now have Pot Liquor Capital. We got the Farm in St. Joe that's coming on board. We have the Fair Food Network, Argus Farm Stop, Growing Hope, Old City Acres, We the People, Opportunity Farm, Willow Run Acres, as well as 2 Marines. And our whole goal is to help create an ecosystem. The reason why is that based off some data, some old USDA data around 2015, out of maybe 2,500 farmers that were cited within that data, there were only 18 Black farmers that contributed. But me understanding and knowing who my people are and why we sometimes don't contribute to census data, I knew that there were more farmers than what was recorded. And so I felt like, okay, let's figure out what kind of help, what kind of support do they need. Can you go to the next slide? So for our land fund, it's different. We reached out to a lot more counties because we noticed that it was a lot of farmers that lived outside the county areas that actually contributed to our Washanah food shed. And we wanted to be supportive of those other farmers that, you know, they travel, they don't just supply locally, but they cross the state. And so we wanted to be supportive of them to produce nutritious food and help rebuild intergenerational land ownership for Black farmers within the county. Next slide. So our funds can be used we have some very severe land access issues within Washanah County where it is expensive for even 1 acre. We do not have a land bank set up. There's history there on why there's no land bank within Washanah County. So our funds are used, we help with down payments for land purchase. We help with operational costs, infrastructure and equipment, other farm expenses, and we also help with technical assistance as well. Next slide. If you notice, those symbols, which are in West African and Dinka symbols, they're also baked within our logo because we wanted to be understanding of if we're approaching this from an African and Indigenous perspective, we have to understand about symbols and how they resonate and what that means to us as people, and also building in trust and being able to look at the past in order for us to get to the future. So right now, currently, I'm working very hard with our advisory committee to look at over the 23 applications that we had received to get it down to 10. So we'll be announcing soon who will be part of our first inaugural cohort and pilot. And so we're quite excited about that. And it's tough. People think like, oh, we're just gonna give money out. I'm like, yeah. But any questions you have about that, please let us know. Next slide. And now the West Michigan BIPOC Farmland Fund. Yay.
Yeah, we're really excited to share with you what we've been up to. We're definitely the newest of these funds. The West Michigan BIPOC Farmer Land Fund started in August of last year. We launched our GoFundMe at that time, but we've been organizing since about February of last year. In addition to Alita and myself, there are 3 other female farmers in West Michigan that are organizing this with us. And we first came together in February with a general goal, not really sure what we wanted to do, but we wanted to do something to organize our community towards systemic change. And we sort of came together through this structure from the National Young Farmers Coalition. They have a structure where they help resource local chapters of farmers across the country to organize around local policy work. So we started with that structure. There's about 53 other groups like that across the country. But then we started talking with farmers in our community. We had some sort of listening session style meetings, and we heard from people what their dreams were, what their farm dreams were, how they wanted to, work with the land and share with their community through the land. So after hearing from folks about the difficulties they're having finding growing space in West Michigan, and the difficulty finding like educational opportunities too, education around herbs, education around farming, especially those that are BIPOC led. So, we already knew there's an overwhelming underrepresentation of BIPOC farmers in our community. There are only about 12 that we know of in West Michigan that are running their own operations, but there are so many more who are farm employees, farm managers, and aspiring farmers too, folks that are growing in their backyard, but want some more space to do something bigger. Alita, being on the Urban Agriculture Committee, she came to us sort of with this sense of urgency, like, I just learned there's only 60 vacant lots left in the city of Grand Rapids. And we all know that there's super rapid development happening there, a lot of big money over there. So we knew that we had to start the land fund to secure some of that space. So we've been definitely guided by the Detroit and Washanah funds along the way, definitely inspired by these models, and super grateful for Erin and Keisa for supporting us along the way. Couldn't have done this without them. And we've been fiscally sponsored by MIFS from the beginning of our GoFundMe as well, and recently received a grant from the National Young Farmers Coalition to help with some of that administrative capacity. And currently our GoFundMe goal is $50,000, and right now we're currently at a bit over $9,000. And I just want to, note that even though we were inspired by the Detroit and Washanah Black Farmer Land Funds, our fund is open to all BIPOC, Indigenous, or all BIPOC, which is Black, Indigenous, and other people of color. And we chose this because there was only a handful of BIPOC farmers in the West Michigan area with land, but we know so many folks who are searching for it. And it's an overwhelmingly white area on farming, has been that way for a long time. But we realize the importance of elevating Black farmers first and foremost. And we're excited, hopefully later this year when we're reviewing applications, we have that opportunity to ensure that Black farmers in our community are being supported, while also leaving that door open to support as many BIPOC growers as possible in West Michigan. And alongside running this fund, we've been looking more into those vacant lots. Like I said, there's only about 60 of them. And previously they were reserved only for development of affordable housing projects, but we learned that soon that's going to be changing to be open to all developers. So that kind of pushed us to have some of this urgency around land. And so we started doing soil tests on some of those lots that looked like maybe they could be used for urban growing. And so far we've only identified about 5 of those that could be viable for urban growing. So, we're hoping to maybe set farmers up with those pieces of land, but definitely taking the lens of like, we want to support you financially with whatever space you want to grow in, whether it's in the city, outside of the city, wherever. We're pretty broad, being a whole West Michigan region here. And we've been talking with the Urban Ag Committee, going to work on a proposal for the city to hopefully get some of those lots available for recipients of the fund at a reduced cost. Like I mentioned, land in West Michigan is hard to come by, and we looked into these urban spaces because a lot of the rural farming areas in West Michigan are undesirable and often unsafe for BIPOC farmers. And it can be really isolating to be apart from your community. You know, if you're a farmer, I'm sure you know, it'd be pretty much impossible to farm without that community. We need support, we need mutual aid. And that isolation is really tough on the brain, and just for practical farming things, pretty impossible. And, you know, in terms of urban land here, aside from those vacant lots and all the real estate jumps that have been happening, most of the urban land here is held by nonprofit farms, churches, and the developer giants over here. But we know that the power of community can pool enough resources to bring that resurgence of BIPOC farming to the area. We're really excited about this work. It's been great to work with this group of women. Like I said, there's about 5 of us right now, but we're definitely hoping to get more farmers and farm adjacent folks involved in this work. So if you have some support to offer, please reach out to us. And I put our Instagram in here. We're on Facebook also. Please follow us, share our GoFundMe. And yeah, thanks for being here. I think we're going to go into about a 5-minute break soon.
We are. Paige, I didn't know if you had, or Alita, if you have the link, because I always, every opportunity I get, I tell people to, our West Michigan folks, their fund is still open, and they still need some financial support. We're going to talk after the break about some ways that you can support our funds that are not necessarily financial, but that are also very awesome. But yeah, if maybe check in the chat, there you go. So there's the GoFundMe in the chat. Maybe take this break, run to the bathroom, grab a snack, do a quick donation to the West Michigan BIPOC Farmer Land Fund, and we will be back. All right, welcome back. Thanks, hope you enjoyed your quick break. I think there are some new things in the chat in terms of how to reach our funds, how to learn more. I neglected to mention that the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund is online at detroitblackfarmer.com. And our YouTube channel is in the chat. Great source of information. We have a bunch of different videos that we've done throughout the past, gosh, because we're going into our 3rd year. I still can't believe that. But a lot of videos that we've done over time, videos of our farmers. And there was a webinar that I did. Oh, okay, they will, and I'm seeing in the chat, if you don't see the stuff, some of these links in the chat, maybe screen refresh, and then you'll see it. But I did a webinar last year about what I like to call restorative economics, right? And so I want to talk about that a little bit because as mentioned before the break, it's always great to be able to financially contribute to our funds, but that's, again, that we want to design restorative systems, right? That's what this panel really is about. And we want to design systems that are not only reliant on finances, right? Because we recognize that that's not how everybody can engage, and maybe that's not how everyone should engage, right? If you have some money to donate to a cause that's important to you, by all means. But also, we want to build a world that does not only rely on finances, right? And so we have to do that by doing that. And so that's a part of restorative economics is understanding that, right? And in stewarding the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund, we're breaking this intergenerational cycle of Black farmland displacement, wanting to replace it with intergenerational Black farmland ownership. So that's of course, that's the goal. That's where we're going. What are some of the ways that we've used to get there? And so, of course, we've crowdfunded over, I think, gosh, we may have raised total over, maybe like $300,000, $250,000 by now, that we are, again, funneling directly to Black farmers to purchase vacant land. And so that's the main way that we effectuate, the change that we want to see in our food system. But there are many other ways that people have come to us, which has been one of the miraculous things to me, things that we weren't even thinking about. And folks will come to us and say, hey, this is really important to me and I want to be able to do something. How can I tap in? And so one of the most exciting things, and something that I always like to mention because it's not something that I think we think about that often, but can be really effective, is a land donation. Okay, so Flower House Detroit, as you can see, was this really cool art installation it was technically in Hamtramck, which is a small city that's inside of Detroit, but we can, we accept farmers and support farmers in Detroit, Highland Park, and Hamtramck. Those are the three cities that are all contiguously together in the Detroit city area. And so Lisa Wilde is a floral installation artist. She purchased this vacant lot for $500 or something. Like and you know, there are a lot of vacant lots in Detroit that are around that price, $500. There was a dilapidated house. She used it for an art installation. It was beautiful. She filled it with flowers. Flower House Detroit, definitely check it out. And then so the art installation is over. You know, the house is you know, sustainably demoed, and she's like, well, what am I going to do with this now? You know, how can I do something that will transmute the privilege of being able to do this into restorative justice, right? So this is, you know, and I love talking to Lisa. Lisa has been such a great supporter of the Land Fund, and she and I were able to do a podcast a couple of weeks ago called Cultivating Place, talking a little more in detail about this land donation that she did. But, you know, she came to us and she said, I have this lot. You know, it's good. I've tested the soil. Like, I was gonna have a garden there, but she was like, you know, I think the way she put it, it was so poetic. Like, the story doesn't end here. The story ends with the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund, right? And so she donated this land to a Detroit Black farmer and her mother, who are now going to create a sensory children's garden on this vacant lot. Okay, so just again, the idea, like, as an artist, that, you know, she would think that she could have an impact on something, you know, kind of that doesn't seem really related, right? Like, you know, Black farmers and making sure that Black farmers have land access and land security. And it's just, you know, been such a beautiful part of the Black Farmer Land Fund story. And so I want to encourage, you know, anybody, you know, if you have land holdings, if there are land you're trying to, you know, get off your books, I guess, you know, for tax purposes or what have you, like in the Detroit area, you know, a Detroit Black farmer will take that and make it into something beautiful, no doubt. So, you know, please, you know, keep in mind, it seems outlandish, but it's really not. So I love to talk about the land donation as something else that folks can do. And this talks a little more why land donations are game changers, because land acquisition, so I didn't talk about this before, I'll talk about it briefly now. You know, we work pretty exclusively with the Detroit Land Bank, which owns all of Detroit's vacant properties and, you know, prices them for using a variety of different metrics. And so that's who we help our farmers work with to acquire vacant land to grow on, excuse me, or land that they've already been growing on that they want to purchase, right? Because unfortunately, there have been too many stories of people who, you know, there was a vacant lot in their community. They started to grow on it. They started to garden there. They started to clean it up so that it wasn't, you know, so it wasn't dangerous and so it wasn't blighted. And then the city sold it out from under them, and then all their crops are gone. And so this is, you know, this is a real issue in terms of making sure that people's investments are protected, the investment that they're putting into the land. But the land acquisition process can be arduous. If you look at our website, DetroitBlackFarmer.com, it shows something similar to what this slide shows, where some of our farmers are in the land acquisition process. You see that there are 5 stages, right? And so very often we find people kind of getting stuck in the second or third stage. And, you know, of course, there's a lot of land acquisition going on in Detroit. The land bank is a relatively small organization. There's just, you know, it's bureaucracy, it's government bureaucracy. Like, these things exist, and we know that. We help our farmers navigate that. But there's a ticker on our website too that's kind of showing how many people have actually gotten all the way to the end of the process, and how many people are still working through it, which could take some time. If you do a land donation, there's no arduous process with the land bank. Like, that's just something, again, Lisa owned that lot and she was able to get, you know, work with a lawyer to draw up what was needed and to transfer that. And that was a much easier process than having to go through the land bank. There's, of course, a strong land security interest there. And usually Lisa, you know, before the legal part was done, she said to Ebony and her mother, who were building the children's garden, she said, you know, go ahead and start planting and start working on the land while we get everything finalized, right? So, and so again, for people that are already gardening and growing on land that they might not own, this is a really powerful way to, you know, to acknowledge the you know, the work and the blood, sweat, and tears that have gone into growing on that land. So, you know, this is just something to really think about, and that all of our funds, I think, would certainly be open to, right? So, you know, I'm not just talking about Detroit. I'm talking, if you got some land in Washanah or in Grand Rapids in particular, that, you know, you don't need, and, you know, could potentially be, I mean, again, even if it can't be a garden, maybe it could be a farmer's market. Like, you know, there are all kinds of possibilities, but trust and believe that a Black farmer can take some land that you have and make it something beautiful. I'm just gonna say that again. And then mini fundraisers, right? So this was this really cool thing. A couple of small businesses who were really struck by what we were doing said, hey, we want to come together and support. Like, we can't necessarily write a big check, but we can create something that we can sell so we can write a big check, right? And so this is we call this mini fundraisers. Ooh, there's a picture that's supposed to be right here that's not there. Not sure why, but Eastern Market Brewing Company created a beer called Abolition Imperial Stout. Okay, so it was so good. It's like this coffee, like stout beer. It had some, you know, toasted coconut from like the Caribbean islands in it. Very, very good. 100% of the proceeds came to the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund. And we were also able, again, going back to artists and their involvement in some of our work, we were able to find a local Black artist to create the can design also. So it was all Black, all everything. It was great. And, you know, that's myself and our lead co-conspirator, Danielle, who I'll talk about in a moment, at Eastern Market Brewing Company, touching hops and pouring them into that big thing, and actually making the Abolition Imperial Stout. So that sold very well. We were able to have an event at Eastern Market Brewing Company where we it got released. So it was just a really cool way for like that community and to be involved in our work. And they're also doing the Eastern Market Brewing Company employees have volunteered at a couple of our farms, right? So there are so many ways that a small business can engage with our fund, again, without just having to like write a big check. And there are two others that I want to, this picture is like slowly showing up. There's Danielle. Okay, and then, okay, here we go. This was another drink that was created, and again, local artists on the bottle. Detroit City Distillery also sold a drink that had a portion of their proceeds that came to the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund, and plus skateboarding, which I thought was so cool. It's this skateboarding shop in a suburb of Detroit, and they said, you know, they had some like fancy skateboarding shoes, and they raffled them off, and the raffle raised like $2,000. I mean, so they were able, you know, through doing this process, they were able to give back to our organization. And just, you know, and again, these people mostly all came up with this on their own. This, of course, we had some coordination with Eastern Market Brewing Company for the beer, but, you know, people were just said, hey, we want to tap in. How do we do that? And so I bring these things up because it's so powerful to see the creativity that can go into figuring out how to be the change that you want to see. Like, how do we take that first step? Like, how do I start doing something that's different beyond just being upset about the inequity in the food system, and beyond acknowledging it? What can I do to take the first step? And so these are just some great examples of how small businesses in Detroit were able to do that. And then finally, I cannot underestimate how important it is for, you know, I think ally has been used as a term for a long time. And we at the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund are personally really invested in not just, you know, growing our, you know, with allies, but growing with co-conspirators, right? Like how you have to be standing in our stead and really committed to, you know, changing the systems that you notice around you and leveraging the powers that you may have towards our collective goal, again, of equity in the food system, excuse me. And that is, so Danielle is a part of our leadership committee. She does all kinds of amazing things that she connected us with Eastern Market Brewing Company, actually. And she's always there, you know, kind of stepping into, you know, an understanding of how important this work is and how she can contribute. And one of the things I really like that she says, as a co-conspirator, you're being invited to walk in someone else's garden, right? And so, you know, I think a lot of the, you know, things that we talk about when we talk about allyship certainly still apply in terms of making sure that, you know, Black people and Black farmers are centered and at the center of our work. And, you know, Danielle has been indispensable in terms of, you know, being able to move forward the work that we're doing, giving us great ideas and perspective. And as you see, we have lots of fun when we're together. Me and Danielle always take good pictures together. And so I just want to shout her out. She's Danielle is a employee from Keep Growing Detroit, who again is one of our coalition farms. And I don't want to underestimate. It is so important for, you know, co-conspirators and like people like Payge too, right? Like, you know, Payge is here and in all of our meetings and has been so involved in the work that we're doing together. You know, these are things that we need from everyone, but, you know, particularly from the non-Black folks who are in our movement and who are standing side by side with us. So just a big thank you to all of you, you know, who are committed to being co-conspirators in terms of eradicating racism in the food justice, in the food system. We love you, we appreciate you, and we are looking forward to continuing to work with you. I think that's my last slide, but so I want to, oops, Alita, I'm trying to go back. I don't want to, okay. I want to turn it over to Alita, because Alita is going to talk to us a little bit about cooperative models and some of the things that she's been doing with Southwest Market in Grand Rapids. So very excited to hear from you, Alita, and I'm happy to run your slides.
Thank you, Erin. I'm just over the moon with this whole presentation and just in awe that I get to have this company and be in company with all these amazing women. So thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit about cooperation, cooperative structures, and collaboration, the importance of collaboration. You know, Erin just touched on it. All the different businesses, entities that have gone and supported the Detroit Black Farmer Fund. There's a role for everyone. And so, you know, this presentation, it's not just for you to witness, but it's really an opportunity to get your gears moving around where it is that you fit in. So everybody has a role to play. And it means taking stock of your resources and where your passion lies, and then getting in where you fit in. So next slide. So I think a lot of great conversations are being had right now across the country because we're having this resurgence of the word equity. And so I want to jump into the difference between equality, equity, and liberation, because what we're doing with the farm funds is really paving a way for liberation of BIPOC growers and Black growers. So in the first image on the left, you know, it shows everybody has a stool, but it doesn't allow everyone to see what's on the other side of the fence. In the middle image, which is where I think a lot of us are at, or a lot of organizations are at right now, is we give people the stool / the tools that they need to look over the fence. And then liberation is, why do we have a fence? Let's burn down the fence. Let's remove the fence and get that out of here. Because most of the time, the fence is something that has been created to serve a select few, but if we can all get on the same page about, you know, why this fence exists or why it needs to be there, then we get closer to removing the fence for future generations. Next slide. So this work that we're doing it within a society where capitalism is king. And so I think it's really important that we acknowledge one of the biggest barriers to us all finding liberation, and that is capitalism. And so the goal of capitalism is not cooperative in any way, and it's strictly to maximize profits. And so, you know, there are exceptions to entities that are operating within capitalism. And I'd like to say I'm trying to do that with the grocery store that I own. We're a for-profit company within capitalism, but because me and my business partner are calling the shots, we're deciding to operate in a way that's a little bit different and more cooperative in nature. And so the cooperative structures are usually mission-based and centered around the net good of society and the liberation of everyone involved. Next slide. Cooperative structures are not new. This has been the way that humans have been surviving and thriving and evolving since the dawn of humanity. Capitalism is what has been a newer structure, and I think most of us can agree that from the capitalist experiment, it's not working for us. So it's not working for us, and it's time that we come back to our roots and adopt more cooperative structures so that we can remove the wealth disparity that continues to grow in our society. So cooperative structures, the roots are from early African civilizations. Keisa mentioned this earlier. Right now the corporation is at the center of our concern as humans, and it's wreaking havoc on our earth. It's leaving most people with not enough, when the reality is there is enough resources for all of us here. It's just the hoarding that happens within capitalism doesn't make way for a just distribution of those resources. So empowering cooperative structures provides more resiliency for our society at large. And that's where everyone has stake in the cooperation of all of us together. So there's many examples of cooperative structures that still exist today. And I think that it's important that we look at those structures and continue to evolve them to fit the needs of today's society, tomorrow's society. Mutual aid is one example. Credit unions are another. I just found out this weekend that my great-grandpa started a credit union that still exists today. So these aren't things that are in the past. It's here, it's now. Childcare sharing, group real estate purchases, sharing tools and equipment, worker-owned businesses. This is something that Southeast Market will adopt in the future here. Bartering, meal trains. The CSA, Community Supported Agriculture, is a cooperative structure, crowdfunding in general. And then I'm going to share a little bit about how our grocery store provides that structure and vehicle for community also. So affordable food is such a huge barrier for many in our community. And with the cost of food going up, we decided to create this fund called Pay It Forward. And so anyone can donate to Pay It Forward. We have standing donors. Anytime you check out at Southeast Market, you're encouraged to round up your purchase to add back into the pot. And so Pay It Forward dollars provides a subsidy for all of our produce, all of our meat, all of our dairy, and that's for every single person that purchases. There's no, do you want to use the subsidy? There's no, what do you make every year? Everybody has to take the subsidy. And one of the reasons why we do that is because we want people to be humbled and feel very much a part of the receiving end, because it changes your framework. I think some systems of mutual aid and community care, it looks like people with means just are giving to people with less means. And that power structure can cause some issues. And so we really want everybody to be on both sides, giving when you have means and live into abundance, And when you don't, you're still going to be receiving the subsidy. So I think it's a really nice way to get people to participate on both sides, because life is so, life can be so unpredictable, and you never know when you're going to be on the receiving or the giving end. So it's nice to have people experience both of those sides. Also, we're providing an opportunity for people to give free groceries to people in our community that experience food insecurity or living under food apartheid. And we offer that through our produce subscriptions. So we offer produce subscriptions similar to a CSA, but working with several different local farms. And you have the opportunity to purchase one for yourself and someone else. And we call that soul to soul. And through that program, we've been able to provide thousands of grocery orders for free to people in our community who are living under food apartheid. Next slide. So really the difference in capitalism and cooperative structures is how it ties to our liberation as people and how we're amassing resources. So capitalism encourages us to believe that we're on our own, it's very individualistic, and that liberation, our liberation and self-determined liberation can only manifest through amassing resources for us and our own. And cooperation helps us to lean into the fact that all of our liberation is tied to each other's liberation, and helps us to live in abundance and manifest our liberation through the sharing of resources. And so if cooperative structures are not your thing, that's okay. There's a space for you. You can provide resources for some of us to do the work, or you can bring your skills and talents to these cooperative structures. But most importantly, if just providing resources, whether it be financial resources, land, is what you're up for, just let the people doing the work do the work and get out of the way. So I've experienced a lot of that in West Michigan, where people want to tell us how to do this work. And I think we just need to, I know that we just need to listen to the people that are on the ground. They're living, breathing this work, and they see what needs to happen. And so I'm talking specifically to all the white folks, the well-meaning white folks that want to be a part of the solution. Sometimes being a part of the solution means providing some of your resources and then getting out of the way. Next slide. So part of figuring out where you fit in and how best to collaborate within cooperative structures is to take stock of what's happening in your community. Look to the systems with the most inequities, and like Erin started us off with, the history of Black land ownership. Less than 1% of our nation's farms are owned by Black folks. And so there's a huge inequity, and those are the spaces that we really need to pour the most energy into. And so systems like land ownership, Black land ownership specifically, are what we really need to pay attention to. And that's why these funds were created. And so listening to the people of color doing the work on the ground, we are surrounded by so much wisdom and knowledge. And because we're living in a society that prioritizes white supremacy, it's easy to find the European-centered answers, but there's so much indigenous knowledge if you can just listen to people of color and stop trying to put your ideas on us. We really just need to be empowered to do the work that we know needs to be done in the way that we see fit for our communities. And so, like I said in the last slide, sometimes the best thing to do is to just get out of the way and provide in the ways that the leaders of these organizations are really speaking into what we need. So working backwards from the dream, I think that's important because sometimes it's hard for us to see the end goal, and we can be overwhelmed by the end goal, which is food sovereignty. But if we can work backwards from the best case scenario, then we can kind of chunk these different things that need to happen into bits and pieces that we can realistically work on. So don't be discouraged by all this work that needs to get done. Working collaboratively means that you don't have to do it alone. You can't do it alone. We can't do this alone. So it's really important to learn from the other folks that are doing this work. And like we're learning in West Michigan, we're learning so much from the Detroit Black Farmer Land Fund and from the Washanah Black Farmer Fund, because they have a robust community with boots on the ground doing this work. And so we don't have to recreate the wheel. And so we're carefully taking notes from these amazing entities and people and applying it to how it makes best sense in our region. And even though there's just 3 land funds, I think there's room for more. And I hope to see more in this country. And we're happy to provide some insight into how to do that. So I'm speaking for Detroit and Washanah right now, but I know that they're open to sharing some of the things that they've learned. And I love that this is going to be recorded, so we'll be able to share that with other people who are interested. So next slide. So part of figuring out where you fit in means taking stock of your resources. And resources doesn't always have to look like money. It doesn't always have to look like land. I know, for example, right now, our fund really needs help with social media. It's like the best way, one of the best ways to communicate with folks in this day and age. And so there's a lot of people out there who are really good at social media. And if you have, an hour a week of extra time, you could apply your skills to this collective project. So really taking the time to download what your resources might be, and thinking through how much patience you have for what you're proposing, how much follow through you have for what you're proposing, because the last thing we want to do is take on pieces of this project and then not really have all your heart and soul in it. And then it falls back on organizers to pick up the pieces. So just taking some time to really download what you have to offer to the cause. But it doesn't need to always be money. It doesn't always have to be land. There's many different ways that you can contribute. But coming to the table with what you can contribute is very helpful, because as organizers, we're all very busy. And so if you just show up and say, like, I want to help, there's infinite ways to help, but to acknowledge and really care for how best you can contribute, and so that you're doing work that you also enjoy and that you're also good at, or that you want to evolve your skills around, you have to take that time first before you just run into an email, run into I want to meet with you, and think about how best you can contribute. Next slide. So this picture on the right is a picture of the Black Panther Party and their school lunch program or school breakfast program. And so they were really instrumental in the formation of the federal school food program. And it was because they saw a need in their community and created this breakfast program that was very community powered. You know, this wasn't like a whole bunch of grants coming in from the USDA. This is like people showing up, putting dollars there, serving kids so that they could learn all day and evolve their family and get into their own self-determined future. And from that experience, the federal government was feeling shame about their contributions to school food. And so from the Black Panther Party's school food program was birthed the robust school food program that we know today as free and reduced lunch for children. So even though I share that, because even though the federal government was really doing a lackluster job, they were inspired by the work done in community. And so some of this work that we're doing and systems that we're creating, entities that we're creating, is really paving the way to hold the larger systems accountable. And so this is one example of how community power inspires the system at large. And now we have robust policy around school food. And so I really think that what we're doing is paving the way for the accountability that we have yet to see from places like the USDA to support Black farmers. Next slide. So next, I really want to just speak into some of the collaborative vision that's happening in West Michigan through some of the work that I'm doing with Payge, we're doing as the Bipoc Farmer Fund, doing as the City of Grand Rapids Urban Agriculture Committee, and at Southeast Market. So Freedom School, our children's enrichment program, is giving children and families the opportunity to engage in urban agriculture in a way that they may not have had access to. And so it's also evolving some of the understanding around agriculture justice and mindfulness. Also, we are learning a lot from the people that are participating in these programs too, and it helps us to evolve our own programming. So it's a very, very much a give and take and evolve together type of framework. And so Freedom School is paving the way for our urban incubator farm that we're in the current process of planning out through a USDA planning grant that we received last year. And the goal is to have this urban incubator farm for BIPOC growers where they can learn from each other, share tools, share resources. I'm really pushing for housing to be a component so that they can be close to their plants. But we see having the intro of Freedom School to some of these concepts and then providing the actual space where people can learn and grow and evolve their agricultural activities a little bit more. Next slide. Our West Michigan BIPOC Land Fund will provide some resources to somebody that could be graduating from the urban incubator farm and ready to do some even larger scale growing, maybe in a rural area or outside the city, or if they can find a large enough lot in the city. And so that's really the hope, is that we can provide access points at every step of the way for food sovereignty. And so collective land purchases are another thing that I hope to see come from the the incubator farm, that growers will go in together and purchase land together. And it helps to mitigate some of the risk of having, you know, a huge mortgage on land, because you're sharing that responsibility with other people, like-minded folks that have the same mission as you. And then having retail markets and farmers markets where people can intentionally support those growers. So what we're trying to do, and like Southeast Market, my store, that sources first from BIPOC individuals and female-led businesses and farms. So really it's creating a pipeline for food sovereignty and all these different areas of the food system. And some, you know, when I first started talking about some of this stuff, some were like, you know, you're living in la la land, and that would be nice, but it's not going to happen. But look at us, we are on our way, and it really just takes intentionality and diligence and learning from the beautiful folks like Keisa and Erin and Payge. We are rich in knowledge. It's just tapping into the folks that are doing the work. And so, yeah. Is there any more slides after that? I can't remember. And so in the name of food sovereignty, all of those systems are being built, and all of those entities that I just was speaking about are being built and evolving. We don't have to accept the broken systems that only serve some. We can accept that that's the past. We can leave that in the past. And if we want to create the food system that we want, we're going to have to create new things. And so I want you all to think about what type of a food system you want. What are the different elements of your dream food system, and dream abundantly, and then take small steps to actualization for that. So food sovereignty really speaks into, do people have the access to have a power over their food? And right now we are just saturated with foods that keep us sick and sad and tired, and keep us disconnected from all of our creative juices. And so I think all of us who are presenting today would be able to speak into the liberation and energy and vitality we feel when we're connected to real whole foods, and when you know the story behind your food. And so really it's about giving people opportunities to tap into that gift that Earth has for us. But right now we are intentionally separated from it. And the only way that we're going to get back to it is by adopting more collaborative systems and getting away from this notion that if you want to do well, you have to do it by yourself.
Alita, thank you so much. That was so awesome. And we love your slides. They're so beautiful. And it's a great kind of, backdrop. We have a few more minutes before we, move. We did leave some time for questions from you all. And so we want to hear what questions you have, but also kind of just wrap up with, some of our visions collectively. So again, we have been, connecting on and off since Washanah came into the picture. And then we found out about Grand Rapids, and we were like, we have to be collaborative. We have to know kind of what's going on with each other and support each other. And again, as for the Detroit, we had took off so fast, and so we have so many kind of like resources or things that we've already done, what I mean, that we are making sure that the other farmer land funds know how to do or have a framework And we're going to continue to do that work because I mean it's essential for us to build and grow together, even though, as you've heard, our 3 geographic locations have very kind of unique challenges. And so while we may not all be facing the same challenges or doing it the same way, it's important, you know, we have like the super urban, right? And then like the hybrid, like urban, rural, and then, you know, of course, Grand Rapids also is very urban, but there has access to a lot of rural space, and, you know, which we don't have. And so, you know, statewide collaboration, as you see on here, is something that is essential for us. I mean, we think that, you know, moving forward, we want to always make sure that we can, you know, collaborate with each other and support each other. I mean, it's the essence of the work that we do. And you know, again, I think that our ancestors would be proud of that as well, right? Like just making sure that we are all coming together. And any of you, you know, feel free to speak on, you know, we all put some things on this list. And of course, you know, land donations and equipment donations, of course, are very important for, you know, some of our farmers and how we want to build together. And then I can talk about the succession planning piece. I know this was something that we kind of touched on, but just, you know, the concept, the idea of understanding that there are so many farmers. I feel like there's this generation of farmers whose children don't want to farm, right? Or like they have farms, but, you know, they don't have someone to really turn it over to. And so again, you know, is it gonna go back to the state, right? Because it doesn't go into anybody else's hands. You know, how can we make sure that we're connecting? We can, you know, maybe we can be connecting, you know, young, you know, Black farmers, BIPOC farmers to these folks who maybe don't have anyone to pass their farm down to, and need someone to do that with. And so there are a couple, I think, of iterations that we've seen, like trying to start that process, but that's definitely something that we think, you know, on the statewide level could be really useful and beneficial to, you know, to this movement overall, right? And just, again, it's about utilizing that resource more effectively, right? We know that there are farmers out there. We know that they can't necessarily find someone to take over their farm operations once they can't do it anymore. How do we make those connections? You know what I mean? So that's a big thing that we had kind of come to, that we hope, you know, we'll be able to work with some folks, you know, here to bring into fruition over time.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that succession planning piece and that funding for education. That's sort of our call to action for folks out there who are working at an organization that's meant to support farmers, or maybe you're a nonprofit, maybe you're a technical assistance provider. You know, if you're holding some of that knowledge and you know that knowledge is not being equitably distributed or is not equitably accessible, how can you do more intentional outreach to BIPOC farmers to share that information? How can you connect, you know, these land funds here? How can you let us know about that affordable land out there? Or can you start conversations with some of those older farmers that you might know of, that you may be talking to about succession planning? How can you incorporate into your conversation about succession planning this conversation about land reparations? So just wanted to put that out there, maybe start thinking about that. How can you talk to the organization you're working with about flipping that switch a little bit?
And also, you know, land donations, equipment donations, and sustainability for our advocacy work. There's a lot of people who aren't touching the soil or the land, but yet they're there supporting structures for others that touch the soil and touch the land and grow the food. And so helping us create sustainable systems for our advocacy work by also contributing and using your knowledge and your skills to help create and shape policies that will keep this to be sustainable models is extremely important as well.
And this last piece, just wanted to reiterate a lot of those calls to action that Erin mentioned and Alita touched on in her discussion about cooperation. You know, we've had a couple of businesses over here in West Michigan reach out to us and do some fundraising utilizing their network and their products. We had Dream Goats utilize their adorable little goats, fundraised by hosting some goat hikes and donating that money to us. And then these folks pictured here are from Let's Stay at Home GR. They make cocktail kits and you know, without anyone asking, they just reached out to us, said, hey, we're going to host this fundraiser. We'll donate the money to your GoFundMe. You know, that's the type of mobilization we're talking about. So I threw some other ideas in here for you, whether you're a business owner or not. There's definitely ways for you to participate. Just think about what skills you have and how that could boost this movement. And if you don't have land to donate, just think about where your networks of people are. I guarantee there are people in there that have some connections to folks that own land, folks with extra land. How can you insert some of that conversation into all the spaces you're a part of? So I think that's about it today. And thank you everybody for tuning in. And thanks to all the amazing women here today. It was so wonderful to listen to your voices for a couple of hours.
All right, yes, and then we have some of these, you know, just links if you need them. We are excited to hear any questions that you have. And yeah, again, just thanks for listening and being here and being a part. You know, this is a part of the process, but this is just the beginning, right? So we are looking forward to seeing you out there, whether it's on the land or, you know, on the trail, you know, to where it's on the journey. I'm gonna stop sharing there. I will. And of course, these slides will be available for folks to whoever they want to connect with, whatever part of Michigan they're connected to. Let me see. And then do we have any questions yet? Maybe. Oh, okay. Oh, okay, yes. And then they're gonna post the slides and a link to the recording. It says no questions yet, but yeah, I hope that you guys, yeah, if I don't know if there's, what else can we talk about? We could talk about this all day, of course, but you know, yeah, if you guys have any specific questions, trying to think if might be a good time. If there's anything that we missed, but I mean, I feel like we did it all. We did it all, and then some.
I guess one cool thing to mention is that this planning for this conference gave us the opportunity to talk more about our collective vision and you know, thinking about how could this type of effort become a statewide effort one day, a statewide fundraiser, everyone engaging locally, looking where the land is, connecting BIPOC folks with land all across the state. So encourage everybody to think about what that looks like for you locally, wherever you are.
Yeah. And, you know, holding space, making that time to like remember, for at least for me, and I think for all of us, it puts us in more of a creative space where we're able to be more actionable. And so we're looking for you all to be in that space as well, like holding more space with people of color and other organizations that are fighting this good fight, taking some time to remember with them. So when we're out there creating and we're letting go of these ideas out into these new systems, I think it'd be easier for us to like work together.
And it looks like we do have a question, and I have some background noise, so sorry. There's a bunch of, it's the village. I'm at the Village Cafe, which is at Keebelon Village on the east side of Detroit, and so there's a bunch of young men down here doing constructive things, but they may be kind of loud. What would you recommend for? I know, right? I'm telling them, come say hi. What would you recommend for first steps for BIPOC in Northern Michigan? Because I was going to say that Northern Michigan for looking to start land trusts. Now I know. Obviously I don't think any of us have land trusts yet. There is a cultivator land trust that's developing in Detroit, and that's certainly something that we're thinking about long-term for all of the farmland that our farmers are acquiring. We have only over 70 farmers that we've supported up to this point. And so we want to be, when land is not contiguous, right, like next to each other, land trusts can still tie that land together legally. And so, yeah, I mean, because we're all in Southern Michigan, I think that obviously Northern Michigan probably has some challenges that we haven't necessarily considered. It's likely way more rural. And so, again, it's just like Keisa has shown us, it's about kind of designing systems that work and then taking what you need to, kind of morph it into what the next thing is. But I certainly know we would love to, be connected with some BIPOC folks in Northern Michigan, who also want to do this work. And again, that continues to like lay that foundation for like what is like the statewide
farmer land fund, BIPOC Black Farmer Land Fund in Michigan, and like what could that look like? And I think it's beautiful to see it cropping up in so many different places.
Yeah, I'll tack on to that. You could reach out to, there's a small land trust in the Lansing area called Capital United Land Trust, and they are trying to secure urban land in Lansing for queer and BIPOC folks. So you could connect with them. And also would just encourage you to chat, if you wanted to chat more about land laws and the legalities of a land trust. I think talking with the Land Conservancy could be helpful there.
Yeah. All right, thank you.
Keisa, did you want to add anything to that? Sorry.
No, not about the land. I think it's another question. Will you recommend any training programs for young Black people who want to learn how to farm and grow food? Now that's a good one. I took a very non-traditional route when I started to learn. Like I just started growing, on my own. But how I got my training, even though I came from Michigan State with my bachelor's undergrad, they do have the MSU organic farm program that's really good and beneficial, and you get scholarships through. How I got my professional development, I just started working on the farm, and I worked my way up to being a farm manager, and I did farm management at the University of Michigan campus farm while I was going through school, and I just learned all the ins and outs of like how to run a farm. I know that the Detroit Black Food Security Network, you guys are you have certain programs, or you can work on the farm there.
The Food Warriors, right, is run by, I want to shout out Mama Hanifa, who has run the Food Warriors for us for years. Food Warriors is a program specifically targeting younger children. I want to say like 5 and up. My daughter was the youngest Food Warrior for a while when she was 3. But 5 and up, and again, getting them on the farm, getting them outside, getting them into the garden, teaching them about, what do seeds do and how do they grow? Again, so the science, the STEM piece, but also the nutrition piece. She taught them how to read labels a couple of weeks ago. So accidentally muted myself, the Food Warriors program, and we also are going to be expanding the Food Warriors program over the next year. So if you were in the Detroit area, definitely connect with, you can go to dbcfsn.org, and you can click on youth programs, and that will give you more information about the Food Warriors, who have been meeting virtually for the most part through the pandemic, but are hopefully going to be back outdoors very, very soon. And then I think, I want to say Keep Growing Detroit, one of our other coalition farms, also has a youth program. So again, I want to say their website, it's like Detroit in Agriculture. It's not keepgrowingdetroit.com, but we're all on social media using our, farm names. So you can find all kinds of information about our youth programs there. So yeah, that would be great to have more young Black people who want to start learning about this young. I mean, that's so essential. Again, that's why I started my daughter when she was 3. I was like, I want you to know how to grow your own food regardless of anything else that's going on. So
Olivia and Payge, do y'all got some?
Freedom School, right?
Yeah, Freedom School is one way to get introduced to some of that. We'll be having signups for kids age 7 through 11 in the next month or so. So you'll be able to sign up for that. We're also going to be launching a paid apprenticeship for aspiring growers of color. And there's no real age requirement there. It's just having a willingness to learn, and they'll get about $7,000 to learn over the summer from other growers of color in the state, and then applying some of what they learn to our community garden here at MLK Park in Grand Rapids. Soulfire Farm has a really great program, and Erin, I know you went through it. You can speak to that.
Oh yeah, and I can also speak to the fact that Farming While Black, which is like my growing Bible, also has a really great chapter on youth programs, right? So I did go to Soulfire Farm this summer, which is in upstate New York, and I was able to take my daughter, right, because they are also committed to intergenerational, farm education, right? So they believe that it's just as important for my daughter to learn how to farm as it is for me, and so of course I think they're not the only, Black farm that's doing that, but they were one of the first that really has been speaking out and letting people know about their programs and how they can duplicate them wherever they are. And so their commitment to youth, and again, culturally speaking, making sure that Black and brown youth are connected and understand why our agriculture is important to us. Again, beyond, yes, there's food sovereignty, but there's also self-determination, right? And so there's again, I always speak of Sankofa, right? So we're reaching back, we're grabbing what we need, and we're bringing it with us into this new generation, and we're also pushing it forward, right? We want to make sure that 7 generations ago somebody was thinking about me, and they could have never imagined that I'd be sitting here doing this. And so I got to think about the people 7 generations in the future who are going to be like sitting on the moon or whatever they're going to be doing, but that hopefully they'll be on the moon growing some food. Okay. But yeah, so that, the Soul Fire Farm is also a great resource, and Farming While Black is a book that one of the co-founders, Leah Penniman, wrote, and has a chapter on youth programs that specifically integrate farming. So that could be a really powerful resource as well.
I know in Lansing, there's a really good program, a youth program with Northwest Initiative. They have a food systems program where my daughter, she was like a gardening coach. She would go out and they have several hoop houses and they teach young children how to go. They have a very mature program that's been a while for quite some time. Also in Washanah County, Willow Run Acres is a well-known educational agriculture education program and farms. He has open sensory farms. He also has the Underground Railroad farm that talks all about how not only when they were navigating, getting from place to place, getting to some form of freedom, how the plants were used to dictate like where the location was at and how they were moving, what was eaten, what was used if somebody got shot or harmed or some kind of harm happened. But that's a wonderful place. He talks about mushrooms, potatoes. He goes into all the intricate details about like what is agriculture and why it's so important to our culture as well.
I'll also add, if you're in the West Michigan area and you're looking to work on a farm, feel free to reach out to us for some recommendations. There are some places that are going to be a better experience than others, especially if you're looking for like some education focused work. So we're happy to recommend places to you. And also, if you're looking for online learning, Sundance Harvest over in Toronto has some really great virtual workshops and sort of talks about farming and crop planning and a lot of these things that have become really capitalist, really meticulous, and sort of flipping the switch and talking about different ways you can farm, different ways you can run the business side of things for people who have different types of strengths and weaknesses, so definitely check her out.
Okay, it looks like they said a lot of those links that we just mentioned made it into the chat, so that's good. So everybody should be able to tap in. And then I'm going to go back to this question about outreach, but because it's connected to that, how do we follow the work that you're doing? And so all of us, I believe, are on Instagram. All of us are on Facebook, from what I recall. Again, I think we posted some of the links earlier, and I think those will be available this is our web presence, right? So I think our web presence is likely the best way to get in touch with any of us, and to keep up with what we're doing. And the other question, how does everyone plan to conduct outreach to the community who isn't aware of the work that you all do? Most people who are aware are in these agricultural spaces, which is true. There's probably a lot of support from the community who isn't in the agricultural space. And I know for me, this work has taken me kind of into like the podcast world. So like I never had done any podcasts or anything, but people are always asking me to be on their podcast and talk about this work. And for me, like I'm a lawyer, I'm a mom, I'm an artist, I'm like all these other things. And for a while, as a supporter of Black farmers, right, not necessarily someone who worked on a farm all the time, full time myself, I finally had to really like step into the fact that I'm a gardener, and that's beautiful because like it's a part of my life, even though I'm not like, I wasn't trained as an agriculturalist. Like I wasn't, you know, I didn't come from an agricultural background or anything like that. But what I mean, for me, it was motherhood too. It was like my daughter was born and it was like, okay, like I might feel like I can eat crappy, destructive food, right? Like what Keisa was talking about, but she's not. Like, I don't want her to eat destructive food. And I want her to have a better way of looking at the world and a better way of understanding how she can engage. And so I realized from an ancestral perspective as a Black woman, but also, you know, as someone who is connected to the land and connected to what healing that can bring, that kind of helps to bring my agricultural work into some of the other things that I do, right? And so I think it's so important for Black people and brown people to remember and recognize, like, this is something we have always done. Like, this is something our people have been doing since the beginning of time. And so, you know, no matter where you're doing it or how you're doing it, I mean, of course, you want to make sure you're coming from the right framework, but this is ancestral. Like, this is inside of you. This is a part of you. And, you know, so no, you don't have to like be a farmer or like be a full-time farmer or anything like that to be connected to this. And so I think that's kind of how I'm always talking to people, and I'm like, yeah, you should grow something in your backyard. I'm like, let me help you like start a plan. I'm like, let's just try one thing, like, you know, and like people are like, I don't want to, but it's like, it's so cool, like, you know, watching something grow. And I love like, oh, like winter is kind of hard for me because I haven't gotten super good at preserving yet. And so I have to buy produce, and that drives me crazy because it's like, I love being able to just go outside and get what I need and bring it back inside, you know? So this is something, a lot of this is about a lifestyle choice that we should really be making, not only for our physical health, but for our mental health, right? And so I just want to remind people of that. That's kind of how I like push it into other spaces, kind of like, well, let's think about this holistically. Like, what does this mean for like my whole life? Not just again, I also went to Michigan, but my degree's in history, not agriculture or sustainable, anything like that. But you know, it's still very meaningful and a big part of my life. So, oh, does no one else want to add to that? Okay.
Well, I guess they were talking about how are we planning on doing community outreach and sharing what we do with the community at large. And I can speak on some of the work that we're doing as far as building this urban incubator farm, Freedom School, Southeast Market. We have plans to do some focus groups in our community and just like canvassing the neighborhood, giving them the opportunity to come have a meal with us. They'll be paid. Our neighbors will be paid for showing up and providing their insight into how they want to see this programming work. So they'll also have opportunities to speak into what we teach at Freedom School, really giving the community an opportunity to decide what our children learn, what we're talking about, even and not just for children, but Freedom School I really see as being both for children and adults. So
yes,
giving community and neighbors a chance to speak into what they want to learn and what they want to see and how they want to be empowered. So we're doing that, and luckily we're able to pay people because we have grant funding, but yeah, not everybody has that, you know,
that's
that
important.
privilege.
Right.
So
it's important.
I'm on mute. I'm a health at every size informed dietitian, wondering if any of your groups have folks working to craft food messaging that are based in anti-diet or fat liberation concepts. Oh, I see a lot of public health messaging that includes stigmatizing language about food choices or body size. Absolutely. I think food system specialists have the potential to impact these conversations in a positive way. Well, I like that. It's not something that we, you know, had thought about, but I mean, I want, you know, certainly I'm sure that Keisa has something to say about that. It just feels very designy to me. So maybe you don't, but it feels like something you've considered. I don't know why.
It is like there's a huge initiative that's going across the state of Michigan now. It's sponsored by the Sugar Smart Coalition, and the Michigan Advocates for Healthy Checkouts. Her name is Jane Kramer. She's situated in Lansing, and they're doing this huge campaign for the state of Michigan, and they're talking to the different local food policy councils. That's another thing, like, what we have to understand now at this point, because agriculture is culture, within our state, there's many different food policy councils that can affect the change that you need happen within your community. They have that voice, they have that stance, they're wonderful working groups. Some could be defunct because they're not utilizing the community resources as they should, but there are some that are attempting to do that. And they also can have a lot of power when it comes to the zoning policies that are put in place that keep us suppressed. So someone such as Jane Kramer for the Healthy Food Checkouts, where they're trying to fight through policy on how to change the messaging and the systems of making sure that things are more, making sure that we're buying healthy food. We're removing the snacks, the corporations now, like we're removing them from the checkout lanes, removing that type of language. John also wanted to share that successful nutrition programs across the lifespan, like SNAP AL, is another organization that could be helpful. Thank you, John. But there are certain organizations out here when it comes to the political sphere of like, they really want to change what healthy is, and they want to start attacking it from the root.
Cool. Thank you, Keisa. I knew you knew something.